The sensory overload was instantaneous the moment I stepped out of the airport and into Guatemala's capital city. We were headed to Antigua for the first of 5 days in the country. This was my first time in Guatemala, and while I try to come into adventures like this with a completely open mind and zero expectations, I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't beside myself with excitement. How could I not be? These trips are built around capturing the buzz and flow state that comes with pushing yourself in unfamiliar environments. And as often happens on adventures like this, my expectations couldn't hold a candle to the reality of this place. Guatemala is a country that has and continues to deal with turmoil in various forms, being only a generation removed from authoritarian rule, as well as dealing with the collateral damage that comes with life on the Pacific Ring of Fire. Despite those challenges, the people here have cultivated beauty in many forms, and the pride that they have in their home is very clear to see around every corner. In Antigua, I connected with Matt and Chris from Old Town Outfitters, as well as Julie Cornelius from Roll Ride, all three of whom would help guide me and my production crew of Drew Bennett and Kevin Horseman throughout the week. Our first stop for bikes? The steep and rough-hewn terrain above Lake Antipnan. Started with a drive along the Pan-American Highway to a community high above Lake Antipnan called Las Trampas. From there, we descended along many ridges to a small city called Paramos for an evening group ride, but not before an unexpected but much appreciated escort by a few young locals. The end of the group ride provided us with an opportunity to connect with some locals and to learn a little bit more about riding bikes in Guatemala.
Yeah, I mean, Old Town has been around so long that I think that, people see us as one of the most trusted outfitters out there. One of our priorities from the get-go has been working with local guides and local staff. So Matt and I are the only foreigners. Besides that, we work with all local staff. And, we try to do things right, leave no trace out on the trails and be good stewards of the places that we go.
There's obviously not a lot of money or resources in Guatemala, and certainly not compared to what we have in the States, but that doesn't seem to stop anybody from finding joy out on the trails. There's something quite beautiful about such a stripped-down approach to mountain biking here.
Yeah, and I think you see that both in the bikes that you see out on the trail and also the trails themselves, right? So the trails that we ride are pretty raw. These are agricultural walking trails, actual Mayan walking trails that they're not purpose-built, right? So for the person that's used to bike park or something like that, it's a little different scene, it's a little different feel, but it's also super challenging, and you see people out on the trails. You see farmers, you see horses, you see people out there. So I think that's what makes Guatemala really interesting.
Day 3 saw us chasing the sunset in the deep and powdery dirt along the ridges above San Cristobal Oahu, just east of Antigua. As the last of the light faded along the trails and the third day drew to a close, I was feeling a very deep and overwhelming sense of gratitude towards this place. One of the people responsible for this adventure, and hence all of that gratitude, is Julie Cornelius, the founder of World Ride, as her partnership with Pivot Cycles proved to be the impetus for this trip in the first place. I wanted to make sure I took the opportunity to talk to Julie about World Ride and her goals for it.
The ultimate goal with World Ride, I think, is just to try to make as big of a difference in as many women's lives as possible through mountain biking. Mountain biking is it's a sport that is challenging, and I think because of that, it helps really build confidence, and it makes women realize what they're capable of.
Our final day of the adventure brought us to El Zul, a private reserve featuring a 15-kilometer descent down the side of a volcano. It would be the only purpose-built trail that we would ride all week, and one hell of an exclamation point for this adventure. The conceit of sight unseen remained well intact over the course of our week in this country, as riding the rough, loose, and beautiful terrain of Guatemala brings new meaning to the idea of shared use trails. It's telling that an adventure predicated on riding bikes can be so profound that the bikes themselves almost become secondary to the cultural immersion. Almost. Gracias a Guatemala por compartir tu alegría, tu calidez y tu estela con nosotros. Fue difícil decir adiós, pero sé que lo veremos pronto y eso es algo que espero con muchas ganas. Qué hermosa aventura.
El frío me